Are you looking for a chilling tale that will make your heart race and your breath catch in your throat? A story so visceral that the line between reality and nightmare blurs with every whispered word? Tonight, I invite you into a world where art isn't just a canvas, but a portal to unspeakable terror. Imagine an innocent artist, her brush poised with curiosity, unknowingly unleashing a malevolent force that has waited decades to escape its silent prison. Each stroke of her paintbrush will be a key. Each moment of fascination, a step closer to an abyss from which there is no return. This isn't just a story about a haunted portrait, this is a descent into a darkness so profound, it will consume your imagination. The portrait watches, always watching. Its eyes aren't just paint and canvas, they're windows to a realm of supernatural horror that hungers for a new victim. And tonight, dear listener, you'll witness how a single moment of innocent curiosity can tear open the veil between our world and something. Welcome, brave souls. I'm Mr. Dreadfull, and what I'm about to share will challenge everything you believe about art, about spirits, about the thin membrane separating the living from the damned. Close your eyes. Let the darkness embrace you. And prepare yourself for the tale of the haunted portrait. A story that doesn't just send shivers down your spine, but threatens to drag your very soul into its nightmare. For a moment, let's become the curious artist. I am Emily, a painter with an unyielding desire to explore the unknown, to capture the unseen. My fascination with the supernatural runs deep, far beyond mere folklore or ghost stories. For as long as I can remember, I've been drawn to what lies beyond the veil of the ordinary. Each brushstroke on my canvas feels like a journey into a hidden world, a place where shadows whisper and silence speaks volumes. It was this hunger for the unknown that brought me to the estate. The house had been abandoned for decades, its name lost to time. But its reputation lingered. Whispers in the art community spoke of its eerie charm, its forgotten treasures. The moment I heard of it, I knew I had to see it for myself. I'd hoped to find inspiration among the dust and decay, perhaps an artifact or two to incorporate into my work. What I found was far more than I ever bargained for. The estate was a labyrinth of shadowed corridors and crumbling grandeur. My footsteps echoed as I wandered through rooms that seemed frozen in time. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and aged wood, and every so often, a creak or groan from the house made me pause, heart racing. But curiosity pushed me forward. It was in the farthest room on the top floor that I found it. The door was slightly ajar, as though inviting me in. Inside, the light was dim, filtering through a single, grime-covered window. And there, propped against the far wall, was the portrait. It was large, nearly as tall as I was, covered with a tattered sheet. Something about it drew me closer, a magnetic pull I couldn't resist. When I pulled the sheet away, I gasped. The painting was exquisite, even in its damaged state. The colors had faded, and the canvas was cracked. But the figure within seemed to pulse with life. It depicted a man, his features sharp and hauntingly beautiful. But it was his eyes that held me. They were so vivid, so intense. It felt as though they were staring straight into my soul. A shiver ran down my spine, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't leave it there, forgotten and decaying. Something deep inside me insisted I had to restore it. I brought it back to my studio that very day, carefully setting it up in the center of the room. As I prepared my materials, I couldn't shake the feeling that the painting was watching me, waiting. The first stroke of my brush felt electric, as though the painting itself had come alive at my touch. The air around me seemed to hum, a faint vibration that I could feel in my bones. I shook it off, telling myself it was nothing more than the thrill of working on such a masterpiece. But as the days passed, that hum grew stronger. At first, the changes were subtle. A shadow here, a glint of light there. At first, I chalked it up to the natural process of restoration, my eyes adjusting to the transformation as the details of the figure slowly emerged from the once worn canvas. But then, there were the eyes. They seemed to grow darker, more intense with each passing session, as though they were watching me. And no matter where I stood in the room, I could feel their gaze follow me. It started innocuously enough. Just a feeling, a strange sensation that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But it soon became undeniable. Every time I took a step back to assess my work, the figure's eyes seemed to grow deeper, their stare more piercing. One night, as I was cleaning my brushes, the room shrouded in the quiet of the late hour, I thought I saw it. A slight shift, a subtle curve to the figure's lips, almost as if it were smiling. It was so faint that I doubted my own perception. Yet it sent a cold shiver down my spine. I froze, staring intently at the canvas, willing my eyes to see more clearly. But the expression was gone in an instant, replaced by the same cold, expressionless gaze. My rational mind tried to insist that it was a trick of the light, some effect of my tired eyes or a product of my exhaustion. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Something about it felt too deliberate, too real. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat as I scanned the figure. The eyes, those damn eyes, seemed to hold a secret, something they were no longer willing to keep hidden. The painting consumed me. At first, I tried to maintain balance, setting aside time to step away, to take breaks. But soon, the hours slipped away unnoticed. I spent entire nights hunched over the canvas, unable to tear myself from it. It wasn't that I felt compelled by the need to finish, it was as though the painting itself had woven its essence into my own. The more I worked on it, the more it felt as though I was becoming a part of it, an extension of the image, and yet somehow, it seemed to possess me just as much as I had begun to possess it. I couldn't stay away. The pull was magnetic, relentless, a force I couldn't explain. It was no longer just a piece of art, it was something living, breathing, waiting. Soon, the days blurred into one another. My mind became consumed with the figure within the painting. The man who stood so still and silent, yet with eyes that seemed to beckon. At night, the boundary between wakefulness and sleep grew thin. And I began to dream of him. Vivid, unsettling dreams that were both haunting and alluring. In those dreams, the man in the portrait spoke to me. His voice was smooth, like velvet brushing against my mind, soothing and yet full of something darker, something that made my heart race in both fear and fascination. He whispered to me in a language I couldn't quite understand, his words slipping through my consciousness like smoke. The secrets he shared seemed just out of reach, fleeting, disappearing the moment I tried to hold on to them. When I woke, I could never remember the exact words, but the feeling lingered, an ache in my chest, an overwhelming yearning I couldn't explain. It was as if he had awakened something deep within me, something that craved to know more, something that couldn't rest until I had uncovered all he had to say. It wasn't long before I began to feel his presence even when I wasn't near the painting. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of my home, and I often felt the weight of unseen eyes on me. The air grew colder, heavy with something I couldn't name, and I could sense an unseen force, almost like a breath on the back of my neck. Yet, despite the fear creeping into my heart, I couldn't stop. The eyes in the portrait were always watching, always judging. They seemed to see through me, to the very core of who I was, unraveling every thought, every secret. And with each stroke of my brush, they grew more alive, more human. It was as if the act of painting only made them stronger, as if something in the canvas had begun to stir, awakening with a life of its own. Then came the whispers. At first, they were nothing more than faint murmurs, indistinct and barely audible, like the rustling of leaves on a distant wind. But over time, they grew louder, more insistent. creeping into my thoughts when I least expected it. They spoke my name, urged me to keep going, to finish what I had started. Their voices coaxing and pleading in ways I couldn't ignore. One night, as I was working, I heard a voice clear as day. "Come closer," it said. I froze, my brush hovering above the canvas, my body suddenly stiff with dread. The voice was deep, familiar, and undeniably coming from the painting. My heart pounded, my breath quickened. But I found myself leaning in, drawn to the source as if it held some power I couldn't resist. It was as though the painting itself was calling to me, beckoning me into its world, and a part of me feared what would happen if I didn't obey. It wasn't long before someone else became involved. My friend Sarah stopped by to check on me, her concern evident in her eyes. She had noticed how much time I was spending on the painting, how isolated I had become, and she wanted to make sure I was okay. When she saw the portrait, her face went pale, her expression twisting with unease. "You have to get rid of it." Her voice trembling, barely a whisper. "There's something wrong with it." But I couldn't. The painting was mine, a part of me now, and I couldn't bring myself to part with it. I told her she didn't understand, that it was just a project, just something I needed to finish. She left, shaking her head. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the painting's eyes had followed her as she walked away, as though it had marked her departure, sensing something was missing. The next morning, I tried calling Sarah, but she didn't answer. I left multiple messages, but none were returned. Days passed, and there was no sign of her, nothing. It was as though she had vanished into thin air, her absence felt in every quiet moment. And somehow, deep down, I knew the painting was to blame, that it had taken her in some way, just as it had begun to take hold of me. And then, on the final stroke, it happened. The air in the room grew still, heavy, as if the very atmosphere had thickened, making each breath feel like a struggle. The shadows deepened, stretching toward the painting, as though they were alive, reaching for something that had been awakened. I stepped back, my heart pounding, my pulse racing as I watched the figure within shift. His movements slow and deliberate. His hand moved first, then his head, tilting as though examining me, studying me with a knowing gaze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, frozen in place as he stepped out of the painting. His form fluid and otherworldly, like a nightmare made flesh. His eyes bore into mine, a weight that pinned me in place, and I realized with dawning horror that I had unleashed something far beyond my understanding, something that had never meant to be free. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as he loomed over me, his presence suffocating. The last thing I remember is his smile, sharp and cruel, a grin that promised nothing but torment. Before everything went dark, the world fading away into nothingness. Now, I am the one trapped within the frame, my face staring out, my eyes following those who dare to look too closely. The painting waits, hungers for its next victim. Each day, I watch as unsuspecting visitors pass by, their curious glances lingering just a moment too long. I want to scream, to warn them. But my voice is silenced by the cruel magic that binds me. The antique shop has become my prison, a purgatory of endless waiting. I see the shopkeeper's knowing glance, his subtle attempts to steer customers away. But there's always one soul whose curiosity outweighs their caution. Will it be the young artist seeking inspiration, her eyes gleaming with the same passion that once consumed me? Or perhaps the elderly collector, So, my dear listener, heed this warning. Some doors should never be opened, and some mysteries are better left undisturbed. If ever you find yourself drawn to an old, forgotten portrait, resist the urge to look too closely, for you may find that the eyes staring back know far more than you ever wished to uncover. But this tale is just one of many. The world is full of hidden horrors, secrets buried in shadow, waiting for someone curious, or foolish, enough to stumble upon them. Perhaps you wonder how I came to know this story. Was I there? Did I see it unfold? Or did the tale come to me through other means? I'll let you ponder that for now. And yet, this is only the beginning. There are more tales to tell, more mysteries that whisper in the dark, waiting to be revealed. So, I invite you to return, if you dare. Next time, we'll step into another story, one just as chilling, perhaps even more so. Who knows? You might find a reflection of yourself in it.